Oh, what happened here? We're live.
Oh, we've gone live, yes. Hello, everybody. Hello, Jeffrey Tracy.
Hello, how are you doing?
Would you like to introduce yourself to all of our lovely, lovely audience?
Well, right now we're just waiting for everyone to come in, and I would like to welcome everyone to another installment of the Fireside Chat with Hazel Moore and myself, Jeffrey Tracy. And we do look forward to everyone coming in today and sharing this time today. And we have a beautiful episode before us. We will be discussing what happens when we die. It's one of those things that I like putting out there with a little bit of a giggle, because there was a period of time in my life when I just, you die, you die. I didn't realize anything because I was not necessarily an atheist. I just was somewhat ignorant because I never really was taught anything. So I just figured, hey, our light goes out, our light goes out. Done and done. And over time, we start expanding ourselves. We get more insight, and then we recognize there's a spiritual entity around us, and we are them. And everyone else around us is spiritual too. So on our last installment, we were talking about what happens when we die. And Hazel went into great detail with a lot of terms that I wasn't aware of prior to even meeting her. And I would love for her to start diving into everything. And what we were discussing before we went live was that there are many ways the soul leaves the body. Normally when a child is born, the soul enters through the top of the head, which is why the crown is so soft. And when the baby comes into out of the womb and stuff, everyone's so, oh, watch out for the baby's head and stuff, because it's still sealing itself. But it can also leave through the top of the head. But Hazel was indicating there's many different ways that the soul can leave the body when we pass on. So here she is, Miss Hazel Moore.
Hello, everybody, and hello, Reed. So we're doing what happens when we die, 2.0. I think the up-to-date term is when you've done the first lot and then you go around again and it's 2.0. I think that's right, isn't it, in the 21st century, Jeffrey?
I think so. Are we in the 21st, 22nd? What timeline are we referring to in calendar years anyway? So
21st. 21st century. We're going to the parallel timelines and how to align next week, probably. Okay. So that'll be a good thing, but so much to talk about. Yeah, so we just wanted to finish off with, the dead. We covered the scientific aspect last time.
Yes.
This time we're going to kind of go down the religious route a little bit and how it all fits in with religion. And if you read your holy book, whatever that is, mine happens to be the Bible, then you will find truths as you evolve and you read through different perspective according to your experiences, of course, because that's the only way we really know something. That's the only way we really evolve ourselves, is through the experiences that we have, not by what we read, not by our mental knowledge, but what we experience. So I can't prove to anyone who's walking on the planet about death. I can only relate to you my experiences, my knowing, and you can only rely on your resonance with that, whether you categorically no, or something happens in your body and you're kind of open to it and you have a resonance, a tingling, or a warmth, or you just know that this is true. So that's the only way you're going to have any proof, until you see with your inner eyes and until you hear with your inner ears of your spirit a little less. So I want to relate to you another experience that I had with someone that I love, passing from one sphere to the next, leaving the planet and leaving their physical body behind. So I shared before about my mother, and this time I want to share with you about my brother. I have two brothers. They've both left the body, both greatly different ways, but both in hospital as it happened. Now, my oldest brother passed away about 3 years ago, and he had a stroke. He didn't believe in the afterlife or anything like that. And in fact, he used to say, oh, here comes my soppy sister, you know, with all her beliefs and everything else. But we both took it in the light-hearted way it was meant. But he didn't believe in an afterlife. So he had a stroke and he was hospitalized. He couldn't speak and he couldn't walk. So he was, you know, quite broken man, actually. And I never saw him cry until this happened to him. And I realized that this was the beginning of the breaking down of his own resistance, that he needed and had to ask for help. And this is how some souls prepare for their passing, because to let go of resistance helps us greatly to leave the body. So there I am with my brother, and he's just been given this harsh news and had this bad experience, and he's crying and so on, breaking his resistance down, really. And he was in hospital for about 3 weeks to a month, and I was to collect him on this particular day to take him home for the weekend. So I saw him in the morning of this day, and then I went to pick him up in the late afternoon, and something had happened to him. His eyes weren't right. So I went to see the nurse on duty and said, what's happened to my brother? He's not right. And she called the registered nurse who's in charge of the ward. And I said to her, what's happened to my brother? And she said, well, he was agitated, so we gave him something to calm him down. So I said, oh, what did you give him? And she said, we gave him morphine. And I was shocked. And I said, really? You gave morphine for someone who's agitated? Wouldn't you give Valium or something like that? And then she looked me straight in the eye and she said to me, give your brother whatever he wants. And I just knew in that moment what they had done. And I looked her straight in the eye and I said to her, what have you done? And she told me that they had given my brother 2 doses of morphine, one after the other. I can't remember the exact measurement, but I had it written down. And they injected that into his stomach, and within 12 hours, my brother was dead. Now, this is a man that was due to come home because he was getting on so well. You know, he was walking with a stick and so on. Now, I was with my brother through all that time, and they put him in a little side ward like they do in hospitals. And he was extremely agitated. Now, you must remember, he couldn't speak. He couldn't help himself to lift up in the bed or anything. But I tuned into him and telepathically was with him. And he was extremely agitated. And he said to me in this state of beginning to leave the body that he couldn't cope with what was happening to his body, that it was terrible. He felt terrible. And, you know, I could see that it was his nervous system. Now, no death is by chance, not one. And my brother had a great deal of resistance. He loved his life in the body. He was always saying, you know, I love my life. I get up every morning and it's all an adventure. You know, this is a man who's 64 years old by now. And so we come to his death and he's resisting. So the way is found from within him and from his oversoul, remember, how this is going to happen. Because to break down the resistance in the flesh, which is our thoughts and our beliefs made manifest, is to really prepare us for what is to come. Because you can't go to the higher realms kicking and screaming. You stay in the lower astral realms. So on his last breath, it was a huge sigh, almost like relief. It's done. It's over. I've broken free. So that's how he died. Now, when he went to the higher spheres, he rested for a while because of the trauma. And what spirit do is they greet the person and they put them into like a comatose kind of state, almost unconscious. So you could say they're kind of hanging in space, because the trauma for some people when they die with resistance and not expecting to still be alive, even though they're dead, is very traumatic for some people. And they stay in that kind of hanging space. They literally look as though they're hanging in all this beautiful energy, like a cocoon, like a huge blue or whatever color they need cocoon hanging suspended. And he was like that for, in our time, you know, past, present and future, time and space. We watch the clock and the days of the week. He was like that for quite some time. And then one day he came to my home. Now, my brother used to roll his cigarettes, and that smell wafted into my sitting room. And I said, "Oh, my Lord, you're back." And he was laughing, and he came with that smell of the cigarette smoke because he knew it would annoy me, and he knew that I would know it was him. So that is an example of an experience that I've had, and totally different to how my mother died. So my brother came out on his breath. My mother came out of her body kind of through the top of her head. It was so like lightning. Now, I want to tell you about my younger brother, older than me, but younger. Now, he died on the operating table. He had pneumonia, but he was a drug addict. And they put on the death certificate that he died of pneumonia, which they do a lot here in England. They don't say he died of a heroin overdose or whatever. It's some kind of failure, organ failure. And my brother came to me as he was dying, actually. I didn't know this. I didn't know he was in hospital. We got the phone call after. And I said to my mother, "Something's wrong. Something's happened to Raymond," my brother. And he was showing me that he was coming out of his body, and he came out the top of his head. And there was a hand in front of him in the spirit world to say to him he did have a choice. He could resolve his life. He could take on board higher consciousness in his body right then, which some people call a walk-in. There's various terms for walk-ins, but he refused. And he said to me, he was refusing that chance, that option, because he, in his mental body, did not know how he was going to resolve the mess that he had made of his life. And he went. A few days later, I met him, and he was in like a convalescent home, much like we have here with rolling hills and valleys, but he was in a really old-fashioned bath chair. It was wicker, and it had big wheels on the side. And there were nuns in this convalescent home, which was really, really beautiful. And they had their wimples, I think they're called, were like this, shaped like this, and they went up at the side, and they were really kind of old-fashioned. And I was gliding over the hill to my brother, who was like in the valley, and he smiled, and part of his consciousness came to me to meet me. He didn't get up out of the wheelchair, and I glided to him because remember I was in my astral body to visit him, and he had plasters on his legs, like plaster of Paris. He had his arms in a sling and a bandage over his head. And he said to me, I said, "Oh my goodness me, look at you. That's not how you died." and he said to me, "No, these are my inner wounds, and I'm making them manifest on the outside so that they are acknowledged." And one of his things in his lifetime was that he needed to be acknowledged. He needed to be seen. He needed to be heard, and he never was. So he was in that state now where he was going to be seen for all the suffering he'd gone through. Remember, his suffering was internal, it was mental and emotional. So when I went to see him, he wanted me to see, you know, if I walked about like this with broken legs and my arms and my head all bandaged, people would have seen that and they would have helped him, perhaps more. I don't know, that I'm just, you know, adding that bit now. But anyway, there he was in this beautiful, beautiful sanctuary, sitting in this bath chair, this wicker wheelchair, and we were together quite some time. And he comes and goes a lot. But now, this is a long time ago, he's moved on from that over the years, and he is off helping other people, but it's a joy to him. He meets other people who pass over when there are like thousands passing over all at one time, and he helps them to adjust and to meet them where they're at within their consciousness. So that's my experience. Another two experiences that I've had of death and having met the souls after they've passed. So let's bring that now to some religious teachings that we've all been subjected to.
Yes. Now, when we're talking about those type of teachings, have they been changed over time? Like, have they been interpreted differently? Is the Bible being interpreted correctly is more or less what I'm alluding to here.
Well, I've read the Bible and I've studied it, and the only teachings that I take any notice of are the ones of Jesus the Christ, that the words that he spoke. I actually bought a Bible where his words were highlighted in red. And out of the whole book, there was just a few pages of what the Christ had actually said. And one of them was, let the dead bury the dead. Now, how can the dead bury the dead? It must have meant something else. It means the dead in consciousness. And people, you know, depending what consciousness you're coming from, where your intelligence is at and your emotional intelligence and how expanded different levels of your consciousness are is how you're going to interpret that. And also remember what you have come to experience. And in those days, people were well into separation consciousness, separation from spirit, which we spoke about last time, is, in my mind, the only sin, if there can ever be a sin at all, is that we separated ourselves from our divinity. We cut ourselves off in our consciousness and shut the door, basically, on that level of ourselves. So the dead, let the dead bury the dead, you know, and that to me speaks for itself. How can you misinterpret that? How can the dead bury the dead? They can't. So it's a state of consciousness that the Christ is talking about. Those that are dead to the higher spheres, the higher frequencies of life, you know, they just really are shut off and dead. And that's why arguing and debating about these kinds of topics is really quite a useless pastime.
See, for me, when I'm referring to, you know, are we interpreting things correctly? Well, my understanding at a young age and even into later adulthood was the fact that there is a heaven and a hell, and we're going to go to one or the other based on the choices and decisions we make throughout life. I'm just going to. So one of the things that I really liked listening to was a speech that was done, not a speech, but an interview that Muhammad Ali did back when he was a professional fighter and he was still fighting. And he was asked, you know, the question, what are you going to do after you die? And I'll post that video that I have of him talking later on my YouTube channel. It just came to my mind that I was wanting to post that because he had a great little rendition back then about how much he wanted to just give back to the world because he had spent so many years of his life more or less not living it. And he expressed it by, well, think how many years you're in school, and then how many years you're asleep, and then how many years you're traveling to one place or another. And then he accumulated, by the time you're maybe 50 years old, you're only actually like 10 years into your life because you've been only living 10 years of it. All of it, other than that, has been dedicated to doing something else. So I thought on that for a bit, and then he expanded some more, and he talked about how he also wanted to become one for God because he didn't want to go to hell. And that's the part that I was more or less directing the question, you know, how did things get so misinterpreted that we're having this option, one or the other, we're going to heaven or hell. And we're not the ones that choose this, some other entity is. And when you walk through the pearly gates, as they say, that's when the decision is made. Like there's someone with a checklist that said, oh, you didn't open the door for that lady who was pregnant, or you didn't get up off the bus and let that old person sit down because they are in a walker. Like these type of things seem to stick around for so many years, and then they get, I guess, convoluted to the point where it's like, what is right and wrong? What is a moral decision and what is just the right thing to do? What's integrity? These are the sort of things that, you know, I'm questioning in the sense of, you know, when we're interpreting the Bible or misinterpreting the Bible, how did we go from all of what it says in the text to what it is that we're struggling with as a moral issue that's not really morality in any respect?
Well, that's all to do with the fall from grace that happened millennia ago. Now, when you go back into the beginning of the Bible and you read, about Abraham and so on, they used to wear tabards that were Ouija boards, but they were jeweled. They were beautiful tabards that they wore over them, and they used those as, how we would use divining rods or something like that. So tools of divination. Now, in the early times of us coming to the planet, we didn't need someone to mediate between ourselves and our spirit. But through the fall from grace, when slowly the insidiousness of it all started to cut us all off, we couldn't discern. We lost our ability to discern what was truth and what was not. And also, when we first came to the planet, millennia ago, we weren't fully incarnate. We were really like etheric beings that kind of drifted over the planet, and we became denser and denser and denser.
By denser, you mean we're inhabiting like a physical form?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
More and more physical. Yes.
Gotcha.
And then we knew that we'd come for this experience, this experiment, to create in the furthest, densest place in the universe that God had ever created. And as I explained before, the fall from grace happened because we started to feel that we could create without consciously involving God, that we could create quicker and faster. So that cut us off a bit more. So then it was determined that we needed a priest or a holy man to intercess between us and the spirit, those that were still on the planet that hadn't lost their connection, their discernment. Whoa, what a powerful tool that was when the church got hold of it. So everyone now has to go to church. They not only have to go to church, but they have to pay for the silver candlesticks and everything else. And they then have to tell their sins to the priest, and then the church has even more of a hold over them. So yes. It was a weapon to have power over the people who had lost their discernment. And I think it was King Solomon who was yes. the first king who people would go to him, and then he would judge, what was the outcome of this squabble that people were having, which was unheard of in the early days of beings being on the planet. So this is how it happened. And then, of course, the church was run by people that had bought themselves into the church, into their bishoprics and everything. They just paid a certain amount of money and they could become a bishop or whatever. It certainly happened in England, and I'm sure across the world. So now we've got the corruption coming right into the church. And then the church then becomes an estate agent. It's just buying up land to build big buildings on. I see the church as property magnets, really, to be honest. And so we now have that scenario where we've got the common people, you and me and everybody else, having to listen to the priest, the vicar, whoever. So
and they're also the ones that are supposed to have the credibility, right? So I'm just winding it back to the fact that they have credibility. We're supposed to go to them for spiritual access to ourselves or other people. I've done poorly. I've treated my neighbor badly. So can you, say I'm free of sin because of this or that sort of things? Just the simple context here. We're not going to get too complicated. So if you just think of it in that sense, how ridiculous does it sound?
And then that's right. And then they start saying, well, if you don't adhere to the rules, you won't go to heaven. You're going to go to hell because you did blah, 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 blah. And and now we're coming full circle with that, because we're understanding that heaven is a state of consciousness, a perception of the way we view our life and ourselves. And hell, life on earth, as many of us know, has been a living hell at times. Mm-hmm. So we know by our experience, and because we're intelligent and we can work things out, that, it's a state of consciousness. It's not a place. Hell on earth is when we are filled with pain and suffering and misery. It's hell, isn't it? We know that. And heaven is when we change our perception, we knock down those walls called limiting beliefs, and we reframe our thinking to have limitless beliefs. And so we are now, like the prodigal son, going back home to heaven, which is a state of consciousness, which is part of the God realms, part of the higher spheres, because God itself is a state of consciousness too. So does that make sense, Jeffrey?
Yes. So everything on our planet is more or less a state of consciousness.
Yes.
In the physical sense, when we pass on, our consciousness essentially is the energy source that is fueling the physical body that we have. It's manipulating everything. It's moving my hands and my feet and stuff.
Yes,
it moves on. We pass on that physical being, the subtle body. Did you say it right?
Yes.
Yes, that's gone now, and now we're into the energy sphere of the universe, where your brother is kind of floating around still. And
well, he's not floating around. They have homes there, you know. We built homes there.
Okay,
I said I'm sorry. There are different degrees of what you expect. Like, for example, if your consciousness expects that you're going to live in a home that's made out of, looks like it's made out of bricks, that's what you're going to get. Other people I've visited, and they have homes meaning sacred spaces that they create themselves, and they are like homes without walls. It's like they live in this force field, and it could look like a beautiful garden, for example, and that is their sphere, that is their sacred space. You know, it's in that auric field, and they create it by what they love and how they want to live. And there are others who are evolved, you know, like yogis and so on, who go straight to the celestial realms, which is a higher level. You know, they might go to the 7th, 8th, 9th dimensions, even higher. So it depends where you are at in your consciousness when you leave the body. I've known people that haven't known they were dead. My friend's father passed away about 20 years ago. And she said to me before he died, would you come and see him? He was in hospital, so I went. And a very basic hospital. He was in a, you know, single bed by the wall and so on. And then she phoned me and said he'd died. So I went to him. And when I got to him, which is, when I say I went to him, you kind of, it's like a magnetic thing. I think I thought of him and I was just there with him, because in those realms, as we think, it is instant. It is instant. So we're in the 4th dimension here now with this chat with my friend's father. And he thought he was still in the hospital bed, in the physical hospital on the earth. And I sat on the bed and I said to him, it's all telepathic, remember, we don't open our mouths to speak. And I sat on the bed and I telepathically said to him, do you remember me? I'm Hazel, I'm Phyllis's friend. And he said, yes. I said, did you notice you didn't move your mouth to tell me that, but you still heard what I said? And he looked at me and I could see something opening. And I said to him, I tell you what, would you do me a favour? It's just like a little game. Would you think yourself at the sink to wash your hands? Because there was a sink in front of him and there was a mirror, just like you have in these hospitals. And he did. And he was out of his bed, and you know, you don't walk anywhere as you think you're there. And he was there and he looked back at me and he dropped the soap. Remember, he's creating all of that because he thinks he needs soap to wash his hands, blah, blah, blah. And he was gobsmacked. Now, in that moment that he realized, when I said to him, you're not on planet Earth anymore, you've passed over, you've died.
What are you doing here? Yeah.
I just like that because it's like a shock, isn't it? But to me, it's, you're dead. What's the matter with you? April Fools, you know. And yes, it was. And then, oh my goodness me, the whole scene of the hospital and the hospital ward that he was in crumbled away because he no longer believed it. He couldn't believe it because his experience told him different. Now, in the fourth, I just want to finish this.
Okay.
In the 4th dimension, Jeffrey, that's how it is. Our thoughts create instantly. Now, when we come to the earth, as we know, they don't. There's a buffer between the 4th dimension and the 3rd dimension. because that then teaches us to understand this game we're playing, that as we think, we create our reality. Do you know, and it's some people, the way they think, my goodness me, this is all going on in the fourth dimension. As we think, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. Jesus taught us that, and it's the absolute 100% true. And a lot of people are in for a great, great shock if they don't clean up their act, if they don't get their thoughts and their perceptions and at least be open-minded. What they're going to be facing when they pass from the body is going to be horrific. I have seen people in pits. My guide took me through the astral world, the lower astral realms. So we're talking about base chakra stuff here, which is a level of consciousness, okay? So every chakra is also a portal to the astral world, and you can come out of your body through any chakra and you can go into that level, but it's not advisable. Anyone, don't do it unless you know what you're doing. Just don't mess with these things. We can go into that on another discussion, Jeffrey. Yeah. So anyway, so my guide was showing me these things, and he took me and we went into this absolute black. You couldn't see anything. There was no light, in other words. The only light came from my guide and from me, literally. Because it is love that creates the light. Literally, we are that. And if we have no love and no light, when we pass over, we're in complete darkness. And so there was like all these pits. They were like dugouts as we got closer. And one man was in this pit in the corner, just huddled up, looking like a frightened animal in inverted commas, but subhuman. And I said to my guide, can't we help him? And he said, no, until we see a little light of remorse or something coming, something to show us that this soul is asking for help, they stay there until something switches on and they ask for the help. And as soon as they have that thought, someone help me, it sends out a chink. A little light comes on in them, and the guides and the servants of God are in there in a less than a nanosecond. I've seen it with my own eyes. And the lower astral world is stuffed with these people, and they stay there for eons of time. And
that's because they went and died thinking there is a hell. Perhaps because it sounds like they've manifested it in their own context. They, based on what you just said, they've created it, and they will live there for.
If they were extreme, and we're talking about extreme here, you know, extremely bitter, no love in them at all, you know, no remorse, no, you know, we're talking about really bitter people.
Yeah, they do exist, and you know, sometimes.
Well, they're rife. The planet's full of them.
So what came to me was, let me just pop up on the screen for a second.
Yes.
So you can have a breather. But what had come was you explained with the gentleman how he created his own reality after he died in a physical sense. So he thought he was still eating, drinking, all that kind of stuff. Well, it's somewhat similar to when we're creating our own reality here when we're living in a world where completely fear-based reality. So everything is that, but expanding on that thought is one aspect, and that's that we've given up our own thought process. We become automated creatures, and we don't even investigate things on our own terms. We let somebody else do our own education. And I don't mean like in this type of context. What I mean is, if I go to school, I'm being taught everything, and that's it. I will not challenge anything outside of that. So my reality is formed based on everything I hear. You fast forward down the line, and we get to a point in our lives where we're not growing or learning. We're just absorbing whatever anyone else is telling us. You run into these conversations. They said this, the doctor said that. Well, when did you think for yourself? When's the last time you actually had a constructive thought that you built, not somebody else? So it's almost like when you die, if you've been living in that cycle for so long, maybe this is the place you end up going, because you know no other reality other than somebody else's thoughts. So how can you feel love You don't know what it is. You think love is something that just kind of happens when you're feeling, I like my car a lot, I clean it, geez, I must love it. This sort of thing. Do you follow? Am I making sense?
Yes, I do. Yes, you are. Yes. So it is.
So-
Yes, we absolutely 100% create our reality. Whether that reality means we give our power to everybody else and we're totally disempowered. Well, we're not totally, because we're still living and we've still got that spark of God in every cell of our body. But you know what I mean. Yeah, we disempower ourselves totally. So now when they pass over these people, they are just like, you know, food for piranha fish. They're like little fish with no, you know, and the piranhas.
But they're doing
the
it to
entities,
themselves, right?
yes,
Because you said they can stop it whenever they want. That's what I'm really driving towards, is the fact that we've lost so much of our own
autonomy. We've lost our own.
You.
Yes.
So when we even pass over, we still think we don't have it because we bought into this hell, so we must live in it. And when we've been living it on in earth and we couldn't match any type of love feeling to us, when we pass over, well, then what happens? We're going to just continue on with that.
Yeah, exactly that, Jeffrey. That is the cruel truth. And ignorance is no excuse, because it's all vibrational. It's not about, oh, I didn't know. It was your vibration. But we do know. There's no excuse. We do know. We know when we take the time to be still and to take back our power. And the people that I've come across in my lifetime, each one of them has been given an opportunity. Each one has been given that phenomenon or something going on around them that is inexplicable, and in the hope that that will start making them think. It's not given by spirit guides at that level for pleasure and fun. It's given to make people think. And what do those same victims do? They then seek out a tarot reader or, you know, whatever. And they just disempower. They still disempower themselves instead of thinking, what did that message really tell me? I know that was outside of my logic, whatever it was. But people, the truth is, they love being a victim. They do not want to take responsibility. And that is so strong in them. You know yourself, Jeffrey, if you've ever been depressed, and you know, and I've been depressed.
Everybody has at this point.
How difficult that is, even to get a shower some days, you know. That gravity, that pull of that magnetic energy is really, really powerful. So I'm not dismissing how difficult it is. But having said that, everyone has a mind of their own. Everyone has deeper feelings, and everyone has the spark of God in them. Every melody on this planet is because they will not recognize the Godhead. Every melody.
Can I point something out? I'm only pointing it out. I know you're really passionate about that, but I was driving down the street and I looked and I saw trees. And the trees, when it's springtime here in Canada, all you see is the twigs and the branches and stuff like that. And a flash popped into my head of our human anatomy when we're looking at tendons and veins and stuff like that. And when I see a tree, all I saw was tendons sprouting up. And then everywhere I was looking around, all I could see was basically the essence of our being in a literal sense right then and there. So when you get to the point of that, it's like I'm eating an apple, I'm seeing, you know, just things are very obvious. But it was when I was driving, I looked at a tree, I'm like, that kind of looks like what would be on the back of my calf if I was looking at a calf muscle and all the little veins and stuff that are inside it. Anyways, just thought to share that. It's just if it's in our third dimension, it's right there. When you're saying it's everywhere, and then you wake up and you go, oh my goodness, it really is. I can't turn anywhere unless I look at an object like man-made. If it's made by nature, you will see the genetic structure that is in us, the coding, the DNA, yada, yada. Thank you. Have a nice day kind of deal.
Well, it's true, isn't it, Jeffrey? It's baffling to me that people can dismiss their beautiful bodies, their minds, the ability to open their eyes and see, and they just dismiss the magnificence, the miracle that that is. How, they're not in their right mind, are they? They can't
No.
be. What
No.
you and I would call their right mind, like seeing with their inner eyes, seeing beauty, because they've so shut down the beauty, the magnificence that they are, that they can't see it outside of themselves, because they're projecting their reality, they're creating it.
Yes.
Even in my own family, my sister, I've told a little bit of the story. She'll look, I'll say to her, look at that tree, isn't it beautiful? She'll say, what do you mean? It's only a tree. And I think, that's her inner world. No beauty in her inner world, so she can't see it in the outer world. But as you say, when you've only got to cut a fruit in half, like a fig, for example, or a tomato, and you can see the sacred geometry in all of it. The sacred geometry is everywhere we look. And that's how, these were the clues we planted before we came and played the game of separation.
When did we get to the point in time where we were consistently looking for scientific evidence or proof to things? It's like we wanted to hammer down a nail and say, if there's no nail to hammer, then nothing exists. If we can't track it on a sheet or put it into a computer system when we got modern technology, when did that happen? How did we lose so much of life? We went from, say, an Egyptian period of time where God only knows, because we really don't have a track record of how advanced they were. And if we do, it's been suppressed to the point where we have to kind of bring it to the surface on our own, all the way up to a period of time where we just used candles for lighting and burning wood for heat. And then we got to this point in our conscious mind that if we can't track it on a computer, if it doesn't show up in a photograph, we can't feel it or anything, it doesn't exist.
No.
How did we get there? How did we...
Well, like I keep saying, civilizations have come and gone for millennia upon millennia. But let's just go back about 5,000 years to the fall of Atlantis. So we had Lemuria and we had Atlantis. This is what's coming to the fore now from what people are discovering, first of all, within themselves, and then following that pathway outside of themselves. So I was a Lemurian. I know that because I've been shown it, and that I lived in that land of Mu. And I know that in that lifetime, crystalline energy used to come out of I was androgynous. Crystalline energy used to come out of my body and form things, crystals, like selenite, and like a fine cobweb. And this is how we created and sustained the crystalline grid that is around the earth and was there since the earth, the Big Bang.
You're like Spider-Man. You're just like shot webs out there.
Now, so that was in that lifetime. It's just one of the things. Now, I'm going to tell you something now. I'm going to put myself on the line here and say to you that this has started happening to me in this lifetime. Not physically yet, but at the etheric level, which is the template of the physical body, I have felt and seen crystalline energy come through my solar plexus. So, and as I get more and more clean and cemented and aligned, these innate, they're not gifts, they're abilities, these innate abilities that have always been a part of my sovereignty are starting to come back to the fore. And when my clients come to me, when people come to me, whether it's on the internet or whether it's at my home, I'm beginning to use that crystalline energy to repair their aura when I know it's permissible. So I've actually started to weave their auras, and I'm talking to them. Some people I tell, some I don't. And I'm just weaving like I might weave and darn an old sock. Our mums used to do that. Do you remember? Or did your mum ever do that? Well, mine did, because we had woolen socks in those days. And you'd weave with a needle, wouldn't you? Oh, yeah, something like that.
My grandmother made that. I know nobody saw, but hold on. Let me just pop up, because I just want... we immigrated from Greece, and these used to be known as slippers, and
Yeah,
in Macedonian they're called tedalitsi, and
yeah.
way too small. But my grandmother hands just want to finish the thing, and they don't want to anyways. So yeah, that's it's
Oh,
cute.
Jeffrey, I can't help it when you said they're way too small. Well, she didn't want you to be too happy, did she?
No, and one's bigger than the other, so I'm getting
So you
constricted left and
So you
right.
get pleasure. You get pleasure when you take them off.
Oh, I stretched anyways. It's one of those things. But yeah,
Anyway, that is an ability that is starting to come back to me. The more and more I'm cemented in the fifth and higher dimensions, but it's coming through this dense physical body. It's going
is that
to come
teachable?
through my body.
What
No,
you access? Is there a
no.
way? Maybe is there a way
No.
for someone? No.
No.
You either.
No. If you start to think you can teach someone their own natural abilities, you are way, way, way off track. You are on what I call the magnetic north and not the true north. This is you can't think this. You cannot think this. It is something that comes through you, and you allow from that much higher level. And this then, you see, goes back to when it started. You go to Atlantean times. They're very, very scientific minds. They lived from their higher minds, the Atlanteans, and they caused havoc. And that's why Atlantis was destroyed. They destroyed themselves with the experiments that they did, and so on and so forth. So that was the last time, to my knowledge and my experiences, that the whole thing went pear-shaped, more so, and we were destroyed.
Yes.
So cataclysmic destruction. But I have to say, I didn't live in Atlantis, so I wasn't a part of that, but I do know that is what happened from the teachings, from the resonance in my body. And I look at people now and I can see that, oh my goodness me, you've come from Atlantis, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It means, they've got a lot of debt to pay back, a lot of karmic debt, they have got to come from love and do all their creations from love now.
Well, we're definitely headed in the right direction.
They have come willingly. They have come, of course they have. We had to. So now we are uncreating all of that. We're collapsing those timelines, and we're creating and choosing a better timeline.
Which will then.
So that's it. The biblical times, going back to the beginning of the Bible, how we lost our discernment, so we had to turn to a priest or an intercessor between us and God, which they were the original idea of a king. And then, of course, we had to have marriage contracts because we couldn't trust each other. So we drew up this blooming contract to say, I'm gonna look after you to the day I die, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And but that was for the sake of the children, because people just were not honourable, and they're still not honourable today. And so that's why marriage contracts came in,
Yeah.
Because we lost the love and the honesty and the dignity and the respect for each other. But let's not get down there too much. It's all coming back. But it's good to understand. We need to understand, otherwise we're not conscious beings, aren't we?
Well, what's that saying? You don't know where you're going until you know where you've been.
Yeah, something like that.
It's something along those lines. The whole purpose of it is just to simply say, you don't want to repeat the same mistakes. And I think when I firmly woke up was when I looked around and I saw everything. I'm like, how can I be the only one that sees how screwed up it is right now? I'm not like a scientist, but you don't need to be. And what is a scientist? Anyway, I don't need to study anything. If I feel something, I know. It's like when you feel someone's aura when they're staring at you and you're not looking at them, and you can feel it happening. Well, if the writing's on the wall, just pick up a newspaper and see the chaos. Like, I'm just like, it doesn't take much to know what's going on, but I can now see a different light. Once you open your eyes to the love aspect, love is love. There's no aspect, so I apologize for that. But you start seeing trees that are you're recognizing that as part of the veins in your leg or whatever.
Yeah, fantastic,
life
Jeffrey. Love
start
it.
opens up, and that imagery. So let me just paint a beautiful picture here with words if I can.
Yeah, put yourself on the screen.
So
Yeah.
I have a little seashell here, and the lighting
Yeah.
is not so good, but
Yeah.
it was eroded over time, and it still had some of its codex left. As they turn, then they turn into these little guys, which are just a piece of nothing. Basically, it's just a smooth thing with no texture, and then so forth. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because even things like this break down. We break down as well. Right now, what's breaking down is all the fear-based living that we've had. It's eroded to the point where you can't see it anymore, but we've been living it for so long that we still think there's rigidness to it. There's still like, it's still tangible. So we still gravitate towards it. But when I'm sitting in a cafe and I'm hearing a couple next to me talking about how they want to get the boat out at the cottage and they're not sure about this, and they're coughing every once in a while, and you can hear the hesitation in their voice because they're realizing they're living every spring and summer on such weird terms. They're not living, they're just existing, and they're eroded themselves psychologically to the point where there's nothing left. And they're just on repeat, but they know better because everything is changing. We've evolved out of that timeline. And when you wake up and you see that and you look over, you want to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey guys, there's more to that. You can enjoy your boat and love it and all that stuff, but where's all this angst coming from when you're talking to each other about it? Where's, like, it's not even like you're enjoying it to begin with right now because you've forgotten how to, or maybe you just never learned in the first place, right? So it all goes back to, we're eroding away all of the fear base of our reality. And now we're starting to pick up little things like this, or going into our Earth's core, and we take out these little nuggets, and we think that this is going to make my third eye more accurate, or I'm going to love it, and whatever. Whatever this piece of matter is however it will matter to you, okay? I can pick up a pen, even though it's man-made, and I can feel and project whatever I want this pen to do. That's plain and simple. When you get past the point, I'm not denying crystals and things can have appropriate benefits and that sort of thing, but there's an even higher level that Hazel has helped open up in me, is that whatever matters, it matters most to you. This can matter the most, a cup of tea, whatever. But the purification that you experience from it is all love. It has nothing to do with that physical entity.
Absolutely. And the reason for the first crystals in the earth before humans came, crystals were placed in the earth, part of the earth, to give energy to the seeds that were brought here so that the trees could grow and be sustained. That is the purpose of crystals in the earth. And we came and we planted them to give magnified energy, and we programmed them to do those things. And now we have humans taking the huge, huge, huge crystals out of the earth, and they do not know what they do. The earth needs those crystals in her, not in someone's back garden. But this is a tragedy, and I know because I come from Andromeda, and I was here at the beginning of this planet, and I've been taken back to the beginning of my journey. And I came here and helped create the crystal temples on the crystalline grid and put the crystals in the earth. And they were programmed to give nourishment and sustenance to the earth so that the seeds could grow, so that the trees and the rivers and everything else could be sustained. They are part of that level of consciousness. But of course, because they're crystalline, they are much finer than a biro pen or whatever. But you're quite right, you can program a pen and, you know, with your thoughts if you want to. Yeah. And so we programmed the crystals specifically. And then, you know, the craze caught on. I don't know when it did. Was it the 80s, the 70s, what 80s? And people thought, oh, this is a good idea. Much like the priests of yesteryear, I can make money out of this. I can open up a little crystal shop. And I'm laughing because it's tragic. It's tragic. but it was a stepping stone coming out of what we'd got so lost in. So it's a necessary stepping stone.
I
And
would
I've
call it
I've got
a learning
crystals
base,
in
perhaps,
mine.
Hazel. What would you say about
Well,
that? Like,
I
not
would say
necessarily stepping
no.
base, like
I would say it's an unlearning, Jeffrey. It's an unlearning of
unlearning.
what was chaotic. So when you see, we don't really have to learn anything. All we have to do is let the dross go, accept all the dross, and then,
True.
like I'm saying to you, my crystalline body shines through. I didn't have
Yes.
to learn how to do it. God created me that way. And you know, like when I'm saying to you, the crystalline energy is starting to come through my solar plexus. You know, that was there. I didn't sit down and say, right, I'm going to make this happen. It's not
Yep.
possible. It's just not possible. It was already me. I was and am the crystalline being.
Was
And
it?
because I've done all the inner work, and this is what I came to do, I was steeped in separateness like everybody else for the first, 30 years of my life and beyond. As I was coming out of it, it's a process. You don't come out overnight. It'd be lovely if we could, but it would be too much of a shock. And if the other people around you are not coming out of it at the same time and you're still on the planet, and because it's a process side by side, black and white, negative and positive, and all of that, you can really, some folk really feel the loneliness of the lower octave of solitude, and all of these things. So it's a process that we go through. But now, in 2016, it's all quickening because the fourth dimension is crumbling. The veils, what that means is the veils are being lifted. We're changing our belief system. So we're not going to need a fourth dimension. We're not going to need a dimension where our thoughts and emotions materialize instantly, because we're beginning to understand that from the third dimension. So we don't need that wall, that limiting belief in place. We create our own reality. How does that work? Well, do you know, I had a dream and I dreamt that I got a Lamborghini instantly. I just thought it and there it was, And that is so in the astral world. That is so. And then you put two and two together. And if you're a bit intelligent or you're a thinker, you might think, well, if I did that in my dream state and it was really real, I felt it, I could feel the handle, I could hear that beautiful click as the door shut, magic to my ears. If I can do that in my sleep state and it was very, very real, why can't I do it when I wake up and my focus is on this heavier, dense world? People are waking up to that. I mean, it's the simplicity of that, and they're waking up to the fact that love is the key. We are here to have and experience all of that. There's nothing wrong with any of it. It's just, let's do it in love and not keep it just for the few. It's for everyone, but not everyone wants a Lamborghini, whatever. But you know what I'm saying.
I do, and I'm gonna say this too. I'm gonna say, everyone, thank you again for tuning in for us on today's fireside chat. It's now 12:58 p.m. and we're going to be doing a little bit of a sign off. And thank you again for looking this way. And this is Hazel Moore over here. And
bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. See you next week.
Bye-bye.